9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Live from Swansea, this is the Twilight Show with Nathan Gynn.
Borodar Pab, Croeso i Abertawe. Hello and welcome to Swansea and the Twilight Show with me, Nathan Gynn. Tonight we're joined by musician and music educator Gary Cunningham. We're going to be talking music for life. What does good music education look like? What instruments should children be learning? And what songs should be on the curriculum? We got it all tonight. Tune in, talk it out, off we go.
Live from Swansea, this is the Twilight Show with Nathan Gynn on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Borodar Pab, Croeso i Abertawe. Hello everyone, welcome to Swansea, welcome to the Twilight Show on Teachers Talk Radio with me, Nathan Gynn. And I'm looking out the window and we have not yet, I saw people tweeting about this, that, you know, the days are getting longer again, the evenings are getting lighter. We've not yet hit that magical time that we get twice a year where the Twilight Show is on actually at twilight. It's actually still dark outside. We don't bother changing the name, still the Twilight Show. We're still in the dark days of winter though here, and I have even had, it's very rare, we had snow in Swansea yesterday, which rarely ever happens. We are in winter, but in these dark days of winter we are going to be talking about music. That passion for musical education, for music in the curriculum, what should it be like, what should it look like, and what should teachers be doing to help it? Now, as I said in the introduction, I'm joined by Gary Cunningham, who's a musician and musical educator. I'm just going to see if we've got him on the line. Gary, are you with us?
Hello, Nathan. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming through just a little bit louder if you're possible, a little bit closer to that mic, but you're coming through.
Better.
Yep, that's perfect. You're coming through nice and clear for us there. So welcome to Teachers Talk Radio.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and well, I think, what we'd like to do, I think what would be great for everyone is if we start off, I'm going to pry a little bit into you as a person, first of all. And I think when we start talking about music education, and I might have a few questions around this as we go on, just about, I think there's some personal talent that teachers might have, or personal skill, maybe we can discuss that as well. But when it comes to their confidence in teaching music. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, sort of what you currently do and how you got into it?
So I'm currently a trainee music teacher at Stantonbury School in Milton Keynes. Been there for 8 months now. It's been an absolute journey. I've loved every second. But before I always knew I wanted to be a music teacher, but before I had the chance to do that and make that a reality, I actually spent a lot of time on tour with various different bands throughout my first few years. And then when COVID hit, I remember I was booked on 2 tours. So I said to my friends, right, 1 more year on the road and I'm done. And of course they all laughed because they didn't believe a word I was saying. And then COVID hit, and I remember I was teaching a one-to-one piano lesson, and every gig kept getting cancelled one after the other. And I was like, right, well, that's it. No more touring. Time to focus on the teaching side of things. Excuse me. So I did a lot of supply teaching to get my experience up, and born and bred in Essex, as you can probably tell from my accent. And then moved up to Luton quite recently, but 2 years ago, and then ended up getting a job at Stantonbury. So yeah, and now we are here, and I'm enjoying every second of being a music teacher for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to unpick a little bit. You've dropped a few kind of clues now. I'm going to pull on these threads at the moment. So one of the things you talked about a little bit there was about your sort of own musical ability. So were you always musical? Did you have music lessons? And by that, I mean tuition yourself. Were you one of these people who are self-taught? What was your own kind of musical journey?
So this is I love telling the story because it makes everyone laugh. So I've been playing piano since I was 4. I've always been interested in music because my mum used to take me to like those toddler baby music classes you can get. My
Yeah.
mum took me to those. Not that I remember that, obviously, because I was far too young. Um, and then my granddad gave me a keyboard just for Christmas because he got it for Christmas, and I really liked it. And of course, a granddad gives their grandchild whatever they want. So he said, "Here you go, have it until you get your own one." And I had it. I was really, really grateful and everything. And then um, one day I was laying in bed and I had the theme from Casualty on the TV, and come down the next morning and somehow I was playing the theme note for note on the keyboard. My dad come into the room absolutely gobsmacked and turned to my mum and said, "We have to get this. We have to get our son music lessons, like pro." Um, so I was part of group tuition under a great piano teacher named Tom Potton. And then he said to my mum and dad, "Look, Gary is um, the group lessons, so I want to take him on one to one because it transpired that I could actually play by ear.
Right.
Um, so I've always had a musical talent, I suppose, a musical gift. And then it sort of grew from a hobby into a job for a little while. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. I went on a bit of a tangent there.
No, it does. I find it really, really interesting, particularly when we talk about subjects such as maybe art, maybe languages, but definitely music as well. I think just kind of where that comes from, where teachers who are passionate about it kind of get that from. Now, the other bit I wanted to pull apart, and I should say, if you are listening live in the Podbean studio, you can message us in, you can text us in. If you have any questions that you want to throw our way, you can, of course, call in. We are live. You can tweet us at TT Radio Official on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram, all of those things. So you can join in the conversation, join in the chat. Now, the other bit that you talked a little bit about there, you've talked about it for yourself as a learner, but also you talked about as a teacher, was about this tuition. I'm going to use that word for it, but musical tuition. So you've done a bit of one-to-one teaching, and you've received it yourself, but you've also done that kind of group teaching, whole class teaching. Is there much difference between that, like as a learner, as a teacher?
As a learner, to be honest with you, Nathan, I can't really remember. I was so young. I can't remember what it was like really being in a group. To be honest, I can say I enjoyed it, but in terms of did it make a difference to my overall education, I couldn't really say. But as a teacher, oh my goodness, is there a difference? Absolutely, is there a difference? Because when you one to one with a pupil, they want to be there. They all want to be there. It's 110% guaranteed that they want to be there because they're obviously paying for the lesson. So everything you ask them to do, everything you want them to achieve, they will do and achieve. But as a secondary music teacher, of course, not every child wants to be in your lesson, and not every child wants to follow instruction, and that can be a bit challenging at times. But I've found that just watching I don't want to say the naughty kids, but you know what I'm saying when I say the naughty kids, in my lessons come to life almost, and just have that freedom to experiment is really rewarding. And also, I have to say, the biggest difference for me is the amount of noise that is in my classroom in a group session. I've learned to just zone out and just ignore it, and I can tell what kids are doing, what I'm asking them to do, and what kids aren't. But I remember I explained to my dad what it was like, and he couldn't believe it. He was amazed that I could even work in that environment.
And sort of pulling on that just a little bit more, and then I promise I will stop delving so personally into your sort of early life. But so you were a talented young musician, you're a talented learner, but you would have been going through an educational system where you would have been in class having music lessons with people who maybe had no musical experience or limited musical experience or limited talent. What was your personal experience of that sort of as a learning coming through? Were you bored in music lessons at school? Did you enjoy them?
Um, was I bored? No, because I had a great music teacher at secondary school, particularly Mr. Allen. He would never allow me to be bored. He was great because he could see that there were certain kids, including me, that had a gift for it, so he would set the others off on their little basic tasks that they had to do, and he'd go, right, Gary and whoever, you guys are doing this instead, and it'd be more advanced and it'd push us more. Also, the options for curricula within my school were amazing. I was in the choir, I was in the jazz band, the rock band, you name it, I was there. So I never got bored, but I did sometimes get a tad frustrated. I'm going to be honest, I did get frustrated sometimes because obviously the teacher would be at the front trying to deliver a lesson and the kids didn't want to learn, would try their very best to disrupt that class. So now, as a teacher, excuse me, I don't tolerate any of that. So I just make sure that those that want to learn are in the lesson and doing what's asked, and those that don't are sanctioned appropriately.
Okay, and so my final kind of question, of this part is you mentioned there about sort of that gift, that talent, and so this will come on to when we talk about curriculum, when we talk about the fact that is music for all, is music for everyone. Do you think musical talent maybe isn't the right word? Musical ability is something that really anyone can learn, or is it something innate that you're born with? That's a tough question, I know.
I mean, yes and no. I've seen kids at the start. So this is my first time sort of taking on classes from the very beginning of the school year right up through to the end. And every single class and every single year group in Key Stage 3, Year 7, 8 and 9 that I taught, I said, put your hand up if you don't feel like you can do music. And those that raised their hand, I said, I promise you now, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I have seen those children achieve something. Are they what we classify as talented? No. Music as natural for them as it is for me? No. But are they able to play a little bit of music on the glockenspiel, on the keyboard? Are they able to sing a little bit of a tune? Are they able to work in an ensemble? Yes. So is music as easily reachable for some as it is for others? No. But is it achievable? Can you be successful within those lessons with the right attitude and the right teacher and the right work and the right, strategies put in place? Yes.
Fantastic. No, I really, I appreciate the answer. And I know we've been kind of started off with some probably quite hard questions there. So we'll just switch the kind of pace a little bit. And I know you've been talking a little bit from secondary. My background, if you're joining us as a listener, I was a primary school teacher for a long time. And also during that, I was covering lessons and surprise, I don't know if this will surprise you, actually, Gary, but one of the things, two of the subjects I was always asked when covering teachers PPA in primary to cover were music and were modern foreign languages. And for some reason, they were something that teachers were very happy to pass off on someone else. But I thought if we started off by just talking a little bit about currently in education, what do music lessons look like? So you're in there at the moment in a school situation. What kind of music education are we young people getting?
So at my school, I have to, give a massive shout out to my head of department, Andrew Cormacan. He has devised an excellent curriculum for the students at the school. But if we're going to talk in a more broad sense, which I think is where you're sort of going, we try to focus the music learning around pop music, jazz, gamelan, which is music from Indonesia, rap, film music. So it's quite one. If you ask me to describe the music education of today in one word, it would, 2 words if you double barrel it. Well-rounded. It's well-rounded, absolutely, because we do our best to make sure we are giving our students the best, most holistic experience of music education that you can get. And we push them out of their comfort zone deliberately because music also exposes students to different cultures, which is of course really, really important in today's society. So yeah, well-rounded is the word I would use.
Yeah. And I would say in primary school still I see a lot of that breadth as well. Sometimes tied into topics. Sometimes primary schools, their half terms theme is maybe the Americas. Their half terms theme is maybe rainforest. They'll try and maybe tie it in there a little bit as well, but giving that breadth. Now I wanted to pick apart as well. In primary schools, we'd be looking at young people maybe getting an hour a week of that music lesson on the timetable. Is that something similar in secondary?
Yes, so our timetable is on an hour a week for music and most art subjects.
Okay. And within those lessons, then, and I know you've described sort of, playing some glockenspiel, singing, ensembles, all of these different things. What sort of activities are the young people doing?
So we tend to get them to start on. So I'll take you through the year groups that I teach because that'll be the easiest thing to do rather than give a
Yeah.
holistic view. So year sevens start off with glockenspiels. Year eights start off with keyboards. Year nines start off with keyboards. Every topic has some form of ensemble work within it. Every topic has some form of composition within it. And every unit has some form of solo work within it. Year seven is about learning to read basic sheet music and translate the sheet music onto the glockenspiels, and then we build on those skills for 8 and 9, and then obviously beyond for GCSE.
Wow. And so, we're talking about, for anyone listening who's not a musician, we're talking about, those musical notes that we see on the bars that go across, and children are reading that and translating it onto a piano or an instrument of some sort.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so this is already outstripping probably some of. I'm trying to think back to my days, which was a long time ago, and probably before a lot of curriculum reforms. I probably learnt a little bit of that. I think I learnt some of it because I had outside tuition for a couple of instruments, or maybe a bit self-taught for stuff. But certainly, it sounds like we're setting reading music a fairly high bar there. Is it achievable? Are children at secondary school reading sheet music?
Yes, they are. Funnily enough, they don't think that they are sometimes, which is quite
Hmm.
funny. Obviously, a lot of the music has the notes underneath labelled, so they know what the notes are. But if I take it away, like I have done with some of my higher students, they're fine, and they can tell me what notes are in the treble clef. They can tell on the lines. They can tell me what notes are in the spaces. They can tell me what notes are in the bass clef. They can, if I told them to write me out a C major scale, some of the kids could do it. So yeah, it's definitely achievable and it's definitely happening.
And I want to just pick apart there, just a thing that has jumped out to me there about the kind of instruments you're describing. Is music easier then on something that's laid out uh, in the way? I'm trying to think how my musical linguistics and language probably aren't going to be up to scratch for describing this. Something that's laid out like a keyboard, where the notes go up in order, as opposed to something like a guitar or a violin. Is that going to be easier?
Absolutely, much easier because they have it in front of them, and I can say, look at this. For example, for the keyboards, a lot of the kids don't quite know where the notes are, some of them. So I just get them a diagram and go, right, put it there and look, it matches up. And they have a go, right, I'll take it away now, off you go. And they can do it. And on the glockenspiel, obviously all the notes are labelled on the glockenspiel anyway, but that's how it's designed. So the easiest way I explain to my year sevens about how do they always say, so I don't understand how to play what's in front of me. What like how does it like explain it simply in a simpler way? And I say, right, match up the notes that you see to the notes you see on the glockenspiel and hit the right note. So if you see a C note, hit a C. If you see an A, hit an A. And they can on the glockenspiels you have C, you have A, B, and it's all labelled. They go, oh yeah, and they're off.
So, not a nice, simple, logical transposing that sheet music onto an instrument. That it sounds uh, like that does sound easier than, one of my first instruments was a guitar, and that was incredibly complicated for me and the violin was even more complicated for me to really get my head around transferring those notes onto an instrument, because I'll put it out here for Gary and anyone listening. I cannot hear music. I cannot hear if my guitar is out of tune. I am very much a formulaic. I have learnt the chords, and if the chords are written down, I will make those chords. Whether it sounds correct or not, someone else will have to tell me if it sounds out of tune or not. That stage, but I get a lot of enjoyment from the music, from playing. Now we're teaching them how to play. Are we teaching them also in those lessons how to enjoy music, how to understand like composition? Is that a thing?
Yeah, so we make sure that whenever we start a new unit, we play the children an excerpt of, say, film music. So my year sevens, before we broke up for Christmas, recently completed a unit on film music, and I played them several different scores. I played them Harry Potter. I played them the Batman, Michael Giacchino composition, the most recent one. I played them the Battle from Harry Gregson Williams for the Chronicles of Narnia, and I would also do something where I'm going to play a scene, going to be no sound, and you're going to watch it, and then I'm going to play it back with the sound and the music. What's the biggest difference? And they go, oh yeah, we know that it's a battle scene now, because not just because we can see them battling, but because of the music. Now that scene looks really intense, whereas before it was funny. Or sometimes what I've done is put like a comedy track over a battle scene, or a romance track over a comedy scene, and I go, oh my god, we're laughing. So the biggest best example I can use is I use one of the scenes from Pirates of the Caribbean, and without fail, when I played the comedy music over the Pirates of the Caribbean scene, the kids were laughing. And I said, there you go, you're naturally doing it. What's the difference? Oh, it's really funny. Why? Because the music is really jolly and silly. There we go.
And I when it comes to the deliberate purpose there for those things, they're doing a job. When it comes to pop music, then I say pop music, maybe that's not the right term, but when it comes to sort of modern music, current music, do lyrics come into it as well? Are we unpicking those young people, or is that more sort of the English department?
We tend to not. We've not moved on to lyrics yet. Because funnily enough, we're doing songwriting with Year 8 at the moment. We will be looking at lyrics. But generally, we don't sort of sit there and analyse and unpick. Oh, what does the singer mean when they sing this?
Okay.
That's more an English type thing.
Yeah, so it's more about those musical things, and
Yep.
within I am stretching my knowledge here, to the limit, because we've got different genres, different types of music, different effects of that music, different impacts and stuff, and those kind of things, and we've got the notes and the musical reading. Are there are there techniques, like I'm thinking in English I would be talking about metaphors, in maths I would be talking about different sort of algorithms that we use. In music, are we teaching about, I don't know, I'm going to try and pick a probably inappropriate musical word, are we teaching about crescendos?
Yes. Yeah. We try to link key terms to everything we do. One of the key words we've been using a lot recently across all years is ostinato, which is short repeating patterns. And there's loads of keywords dotted around my classroom. And I go, what does this mean? I go, and I just point and I go, oh yeah, it's crescendo. What does it mean? It's quieter, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, keywords are really important. And I've also started using, I don't know whether you've heard of it, but the Freya model, which is a way of, you put the keyword in the center, and then in one box, you put like a non-example of the keyword. So if I was to take crescendo, for example, as you've used, crescendo is not getting quieter. So that would go in a box. The box next to it would be an example of it. It's getting louder. That's actually a focus at the moment, is to improve the kids' understanding of key terms and using them properly.
Yeah, no, I find it really interesting, and one of the bits that I want to pick apart after this for anyone who's listening, when we switch around, once we, Gary's helped me to understand, particularly at the secondary level, there where we are in education, with music education. I want to unpick why, and that is we'll shortly have a quick ad break to hear from a very important organisation that helps out no end here at Teachers Talk Radio, but. I, so we've talked about a lot of the different parts of the lesson bit, but I'm conscious to check in because, and this might be just, your experience, your school, but you've talked a little bit as well about some of those, I would call them extracurricular. When I read through some of the government document, it's kind of an expected extracurricular element of learning. We've talked about playing piano. Is there opportunity within schools for young people, for example, to learn to play the guitar if they're interested, or learn to play a wind instrument?
Absolutely. I mean, the majority of secondary schools, they have clubs, they have peripatetic teachers come in. Peripatetic teachers are instrumental teachers. So we have guitar teachers come in, piano teachers. I run a rock band, a jazz band, a choir. Mr. Cormac and Andrew runs the choir. So there are lots of opportunities for kids who don't necessarily work well in a classroom environment because they might be nervous and something like that, might not understand it, to actually harness their musical ability. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Now, I think that has set us in good stead. We understand where you're coming from. We understand the current state of education. We are going to move on in a second to talking about why teach music at all. And I should remind our listeners, if you're listening live in the studio, text in your thoughts, text in your questions. You can tweet us at TT Radio Official on Twitter as well. I want to join this conversation live because we will be, now we've set the groundwork, we're getting to the nitty gritty. But before we do, I just wanted to give a big shout out to one of our sponsors, which is John Catt Publishing.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
Live from Swansea, this is the Twilight Show with Nathan Gynn on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Boridar Pawb, croeso I Abertawe. Hello everyone, welcome to Swansea and the Twilight Show with me, Nathan Gynn, on Teachers Talk Radio. And tonight we're joined by musician and music educator Gary Cunningham. We're talking about music for life. What does good music education look like? What instruments should children be learning? And what songs should be on the curriculum in schools? And we have hit the point in the show where I am going to pose possibly the hardest question that I could ask. So if you're listening live and want to join in with your thoughts on this, Gary, this question is for you. Why should we be learning music at all? Because it sounds hard. It sounds like there's a lot going on. What are young people getting from a music education?
So I actually love this question because I get this all the time from the kids. Oh, sir, why we got to do this? And I say to them, look, music is one of those subjects that will essentially force you to work in a team. And being able to work in a team outside of school is vitally important in the wider world. It exposes you to different cultures that you might not necessarily be exposed to on your own. It allows you to unlock a potential talent you didn't even know you had. I've seen kids that didn't even know they were good at music suddenly become good at music within a year. It gives you a chance to release your creativity, gives you a chance to release your emotion, gives you an outlet. If you're struggling in school, the music department, it was my sanctuary as a kid, still is now, hence why I work there. And I just think it's one of those subjects that can launch you into so many different areas, and it unlocks the possibilities so much. It needs to be on the timetable for forever. That's why. And I teach it because I absolutely love it, and I would not be where I am without music education. I can't do anything else. I don't know who I am without it, and I don't ever want to find out who I am without it.
Now, you talked very eloquently there about some of those things where it pays off, the benefits, those ties to working in a team and such like. Does music itself, that opportunity for creativity and enjoyment, do you see that coming through music lessons, or is that something that maybe people discover afterwards or aside from their music education?
I see it all the time. And I've sat there and I've just watched kids have fun while learning. And the kid has looked at me and gone, "Sir, what's the matter?" And I go, "I just love my job. I can't believe this is my job. I'm watching children have fun and enjoy themselves and be successful before my very eyes. I'm watching people find out how good they are at a subject they had no idea about before my very eyes." And yeah, it does have to be music lessons. Not for everybody, and sometimes it does come a bit later. The amount of conversations I've had with just the public go, "Oh, I wish I'd learned an instrument. Oh, I did learn piano, but I gave it up when I was 15." It does happen. You discover it later on in life that, oh, actually, music was really cool. But yeah, it does happen every single day in the music classroom, and I'm privileged to be a part of it.
Now, I'm going to unpick, and this is possibly, where this is the punk in me, I would say, where it might, that it might come through because, I didn't necessarily enjoy music lessons at school, the noise, because particularly at primary school. So, and maybe some of my lessons were like you described as a, cacophony of just noise and those kind of things. When I was a child, I had some tuition. I was supposed to be learning the violin and was very bad at it. And I did not enjoy that. I did not like that. When I went to secondary school, and it was when I found, and this will date me very much, but when I found Oasis, the band, and as a teenager, and found out that the chords to play Oasis songs are incredibly easy on the guitar, and picked up an acoustic guitar and moved on to electric guitar, teaching myself, and through that way, that's where I found enjoyment and expression and things. But I found that outside of the music lesson, and I'm saying that in a punk way. I didn't need to read music. I didn't need to work in a group. I guess my experience of music in that sense is very different to what the current musical curriculum is presenting to young people. Now, is that an issue, or is that a benefit that there are multiple ways to be good at and enjoy music?
I think it's a benefit. I absolutely think it's a benefit. I've got kids that don't work too well in the classroom because of the noise, like yourself. But get them in a practice room and go, right, here's what you got to do. They're off. I've got people that hated music at school, but like you, discovered a certain artist or a certain band, worked out how to play their music, and they were off. Self-taught, traditional classical training, jazz, classroom lessons. It's all valid. And if we had one route, if it was all tunnel vision, there was one route to success, it'd be very boring, and you find the rate of success to be very, very low. I love the fact that there are multiple ways of getting a child to achieve music. And like for me, I just happened to stumble upon the fact that I was good at it. If it wasn't for me being awake when I shouldn't have been, maybe it would have taken me a few years to work out that music was my thing. It might take those people in my lessons that maybe don't like the noise to discover when they're on their own they are actually quite good at music, and without the distraction and the noise of other things going on around them, they succeed. So the more routes the better, in my opinion.
Now, I'm going to throw at you, the this is from the national curriculum in England, and I'm going to throw you their kind of statement about why their curriculum intent for music, And what I want to pick apart, because I want to ask, because for me, this feels like they're asking a lot of you as a music teacher. And when the listeners hear it, that they'll maybe be able to recognize that or have questions for themselves, because I want to understand what that's like. As a teacher who teaches maybe maths, maybe this might be simpler, but here we go. So music is a universal language that embodies one of the highest forms of creativity. A high quality music education should engage and inspire and develop a love of music and their talent as musicians, and so increase their self-confidence, creativity, and sense of achievement. As pupils progress, they should develop critical engagement with music, allowing them to compose and listen with discrimination to the best in the musical canon. Now, I'm picking out there's you have to teach as a teacher. You have to teach creativity. You have to be developing their self-confidence. You have to make sure you've got a sense of achievement there. Oh, also, sorry, Gary, on that list is you've got to be inspiring them and developing their love of music as well as their talent. And you've got to get them to compose and listen with discrimination to the best in the musical canon. That sounds like a lot they're asking of you. Does it feel like that when you're in the classroom?
Sometimes. Sometimes, not all the time, because all that stuff, I like that description. It's a lot, I'll agree, but the fact they cover quite a lot is really good. A lot of the stuff they ask for happens naturally. Like, I don't sit there and go, how am I going to get them to be discriminatory to the best of their musical canon today? Or how am I going to inspire them today? It just happens because they are inspired by what they're listening to, or they're inspired by watching me play something and go, oh my God, I want to do that. Or they're creative because they have to compose a piece of music. It all happens within a lesson within itself. It's not, you don't sit there every day and think, right, how am I going to hit these objectives? As long as your lessons are planned well, and I like to think, the majority of mine are. Being a trainee, I won't say I'm perfect, and no teacher ever is, to be fair. But the majority of mine are, and I like to think that those targets happen naturally within most music lessons without people even realising it. But yeah, it is a lot when you read it.
Yeah, I was going through and going, wow, this is, because there's some big asks there, particularly if people potentially have been disengaged with music previously at schools. And this, as a secondary teacher, maybe is something you see. You don't have to comment necessarily on your own experience. I don't want you to, put your foot in it with any of your feeder schools, but there must be some young people who come to your lessons, maybe in year 7 or maybe older if they've had a bad experience, who have already developed a sense that I'm no good at music. I can't do music.
Yeah, there's loads. I mean, remember I said I asked all of my classes that exact question. Who here feels they're not good at music? And the majority of the children raised their hands, because I don't think that it's as accessible in some areas, maybe even primary, to be honest, as it should be. I think it's overcomplicated. I mean, I can put MacBook with GarageBand, which is a digital audio workstation, it's a piece of software that you can just record stuff into, put like loops of audio that's already been pre-recorded into like a project window, and just do what you want with it almost. I will go, right, here's a MacBook, here's GarageBand, make me something. You got an hour. And I'll go, all right. And honestly, I'm not even exaggerating here. I've heard some of the best stuff come out off the back of that. And I go, see, you can do music. Because doing music and achieving musically looks different for everybody and is different for everybody. For me, it was being able to play the piano and work in a band and all this sort of stuff and go on tour and do all these lovely things. For some of my students, it's being able to sit there and play a little bit of a tune. It's being able to sit there and use GarageBand confidently.
And that really interests me about unpicking there, because when I think of, and Ed Sheeran is probably a bad example, and when he uses loop pedals, because he an amazing musical talent there. But there are people, particularly when I think back to maybe my the turn of the 20th century, when we were starting to see UK garage and things like the streets where people were using software to make music in their bedrooms and such like, or even, when I talk about punk and picking up a guitar, does understanding music as a musician then, or does all of those things about the musical canon, does that make me a better musician by me understanding those things? Would the Sex Pistols have been, did they develop through their understanding of music? Did John Lennon do better because he knew Beethoven? Is that how music works?
Not always. It wouldn't necessarily make you a better musician, but it certainly make music easier for you.
Yeah.
So if I said to my students, right, play music, they'd be like, what? What do you mean play music? No, we can't do that. We need more. And I go, oh, yep, sorry. Play this tune that's written out on the glockenspiels. They go, okay, and do it. So having an understanding of what music is and what it's about does aid in the achievement of it. But I know that there are many famous musicians that have written and recorded and played brilliant music, but their music theory is, leaves a lot to be desired. Understanding music isn't the be all and end all, but as someone who grasped the importance of music theory quite late on, I understand why it was pressed upon me so young. But because I could play by ear, I used to go, I don't need to read music, I can listen to it, doesn't matter. But honestly, I couldn't do my job without being able to read basic sheet music. And the kids at work wouldn't be able, at school, wouldn't be able to achieve basic musicality without reading some sort of sheet music because they need it to understand what they need to play.
No, I find it, as I say, music is effectively a foreign language to me in some senses. So this kind of unpicking the nuances of kind of how it works and what good music education, and maybe we are going to, later on in the show, if you're listening in live or listening back to this as a podcast, I want to ask some questions about, some of that fear. Can anyone teach music? What does good music teaching look like? But before we do, I wanted to ask a question there about musical instruments and opportunities. And I know you've talked a bit about the pianos and the glockenspiels and the ease of sort of translating music onto that. But I wanted to raise up, a question, a criticism maybe of music education, not of music educators, but the way our system has created music education. Because, I've got a quote here from I think the Royal Society for Music saying that children from lower socioeconomic groups continue to be significantly disadvantaged from their peers from more affluent backgrounds when it comes to music. Teacher Tap, the survey organisation, said independent and state-funded schools serving more affluent students have a wide range of musical activities available to students in lunchtime and after schools club. By contrast, 1/3 of schools that serve the most disadvantaged communities have no musical clubs available to them. Does it worry you, as an educator or a music enthusiast, that there is this divide between the kind of musical education that some of the more affluent children are getting compared to maybe what's available to some of the more disadvantaged children?
Oh, absolutely. Equity and equality of opportunities is always at the forefront of what we discuss as music educators. I find it hugely upsetting and unfair when I know that there are people who perhaps aren't as privileged as others and they're not getting to experience the education that others are, especially when it comes to music and the way that music is perhaps budgeted in schools is never the same across the board. It's never fair. You got some schools that have got their own music block, a whole, they've got brass band, they've got all sorts going on, and then you've got other schools that haven't even got a music specialist on staff, and that it frustrates me, if I'm honest, Nathan. It does, and I sit there and I think, why? Why are you denying the young people, the future, the opportunity to create something or discover something about them they didn't even know they had? So the socioeconomic divide is a huge concern, and I'm hoping upon hope that one day things change.
Now, you described a little bit there about those kind of opportunities. You as an educator, in your idea, I'm going to pitch you 10 years in the future now, and you are the lead of a music department, and you have an unlimited budget at this imaginary school. What what would you be feeling? Would it literally be, I'm going to have one of every instrument and a class set of these? What would you be buying into?
So first and foremost, I would have, as I say, one of every instrument. I'd have a class set of glockenspiels, a class set of keyboards, a MacBook suite with all the latest software. I'd have music specialists coming out of my ear holes, not just music specialists, but I'd have music specialists, a lot of them. I would be taking them on the best extracurricular trips that I could find. I would be bringing in the most experienced and talented musicians that I know and could find. I would be ensuring that the sky was the limit in terms of what was available to them. Nothing would be broken. We wouldn't be using broken instruments anymore. It just wouldn't happen because it wouldn't. If it broke, it'd be replaced. Click of the finger. We'd have a state of the art studio. We'd have a really big console. We'd have all sorts. If there was an unlimited budget, Nathan, I'd just create an entire school for music that they have to travel down the road to. But that that obviously, I'm sorry to burst your proverbial bubble, but that unfortunately will never happen. It's a shame. But yes, there are my bright ideas that will never come to fruition probably. But there's me being a cynic.
No, no, no. I do find it really interesting. Now, I want to just kind of put out there while we're talking about instruments and such like. Now, as a primary specialist myself, we would have glockenspiels, we would have some other instruments. I forget what they're called now. These tiny little things that were like recorders but weren't recorders, but they were round, and you could play them a bit like a recorder. Does that sound familiar?
I thought you were describing a recorder then, but no, I'm trying to think of
They were
what.
more circular, but it was played a bit like a. It was very popular, at one point. But what they have moved on to a lot that I've noticed, particularly in primary schools, is a move towards ukuleles, which is a stringed instrument. Which to me, they are very. I can play the ukulele. As I transferred from a guitar to a ukulele, so I find that part quite interesting. But it sounds like that is a potentially a misstep in the longer journey from year 1 to year 9. Then what's your opinion on sort of class sets of ukuleles in primary school as the route, as opposed to a class set of xylophones?
Well, we have ukuleles available at secondary level, and we use
Yeah.
ukuleles all the time.
Oh, okay.
But is it the most accessible instrument for a primary age pupil to begin music education on? Not in my opinion, no. I would. You said xylophones, glockenspiels. Absolutely, start there. Start with a recorder, even if it is the most annoying instrument I've ever heard in my life. I did actually do some primary music a while back, just to gain some experience in different sectors, and I couldn't stand the sound of recorders, but I could understand why they were so important because they're easy-ish to understand, much like glockenspiels are easy to understand. Ukuleles, not so much, but I can understand where people are coming from because ukuleles are small. They think, okay, they're ideal for little children or small children because they're not big and menacing. They're just tiny. You can hold them in your hands and you can play. And because of the way that a ukulele is tuned, if it's tuned properly, you don't have to hold down the strings. You can strum it and a chord will come out, and that'll be enough for some young people, like primary school age children.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I would say, it's been more forgiving for me, the ukulele, than it was at primary school. I was learning the violin, and that was not a pleasant experience for anyone in the household, or probably anyone in the school, as far as a forgiving instrument. And so I kind of do get that people are looking for something that you can probably stand up in an assembly as a group, and you won't notice the kind of missed notes, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It's about, especially at primary. Let's go down the primary route for a minute. But especially at primary level, I think you need to make music look as easy and feel as easy as possible for young children. I mean, you work with them more than I do, but the easiest thing to do, make music easy, make it sound really easy to achieve, and that will unlock the door, if you like, for them to carry on. Whereas if you make it too complicated, they'll go, "Oh, I don't understand it. I'm giving up."
No, I agree entirely, and I think that balance. But again, that takes me back to that. Your curriculum intent in England for the music curriculum, where you've got a lot of things going on, where you've got musical ability going up there, which might take you one way, but also you've got self confidence in there as well, which might you're kind of spinning a lot of plates for me. It feels like when we're talking about those things. Now, I wanted to move on and ask you just a couple of questions because you described sort of the music. Canon maybe is not the right word, but the kind of songs, the genres that you are learning about there. And I wanted to pull on, there is always, and I pulled out an article from Classic FM actually about. I was reminded by another host that a little while back we did have a little. I think it was 2019, had a little kind of spat going on edgy Twitter about always a newspaper will run a headline that we are, and I think this one was about the fact that they were replacing Beethoven with Stormzy on the music curriculum, or in in a perceived way people were rewriting, and there was a big furore about this. Now I wanted to ask you, as a musician as well. Now, as a teacher, I can see cultural value, I can see engagement value, all of those things. As a musician, is all music equal? Is there value in all music? What kind of music should we be trying to get into our curriculum?
Oh Christ, is all music valuable? That's a hole to get myself into, isn't it? Um, yes, all music is valuable. All music is valid. But oh goodness me, Gary, think. How do I? Sorry, I'm just trying to think about how to word this in the right way. Okay, so as a musician, I think that all music should be relevant to what the kids know and understand already, because it makes it easier for everybody. And for me, I think the more popular music we introduce, the better at Key Stage 3, Year 7, 8, 9. But for GCSE, we do need to include those classical composers and those different sort of ideas, because they may go on to study music at university and it might be a very classically led course. They've never been exposed to classical music before, they're going to be stuffed. So I think it's important. But I've found, like, as a teacher, my kids engage more with music that they can already sort of get their head around,
Hmm.
because I can go, yeah, but this is like X, Y, Z. So I actually, funnily enough, or maybe I shouldn't talk about Ed Sheeran. Ed Sheeran is an example that I use in my lessons because kids understand it and they've heard it before and they learn it quicker because it's there. But all music has value, yes. Classical music is valuable, jazz, blues, rock, metal, pop, whatever it may be. Every piece of music has its place in the world, because at the end of the day, music is an art form. An art form is subjective.
Okay, I think you've given me a very solid answer there. Well, I'm going to push on, but all art is valid, all art is expression, it's everything. When it comes down to technically, the technical ability, I guess, the technical use of them, the thing, the crescendo, my only example in this, could I deliver that through pop music alone? So, or do I have to dip into those different genres to find all of the different important elements of music?
You have to use different genres,
Mm.
absolutely, um, because things like crescendo, decrescendo, ostinato, tierce picardy, all that sort of stuff is more evident in classical music than it is in pop. But if I wanted to show dynamics, or texture, I wanted to show what a song sounds like with thin texture compared to what it sounds like with thick texture, I'd use pop music. because I can just say, right, this is what the song sounds like with just piano, and I can find a piano only version somewhere. This is what the song sounds like as an acoustic version, I can play it on that. This is what it sounds like as a full band version, play on that and go, right, what's the difference with all these textures? Which one do you like best? Why? All that sort of stuff. I just think classical music is valid, and it's more, what's the word I'm thinking of? It's easier to demonstrate the technical terms using classical music and classical examples than it is using pop. But it's easier to demonstrate things like dynamics and those popular music terms within popular music than it is with classical. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think I'm still with you. Like as I say, my music knowledge, we are stretching it to the limit now, which is why I have so many questions, and they probably are. My next one, and as I say, we're really getting into that kind of which musics are, what kind of music should be on the music curriculum. So, we've said we can demonstrate the different techniques, all of those things. What about, are there key, as in English, there might be key texts, like I would say, every child should have read some Shakespeare, and that's a kind of cultural value that I've added to it. Every child should have read a piece of modern fiction, these kind of things. So I'm adding, there might be poems that I have. Is it the same in music? Are there songs that you think every child should have access to? For instance, they should have heard this song by Mozart. They should have heard this song by the Beatles. Is that in existence in music education?
I've never said, that kids need to have listened to this to understand something or to appreciate it. But I do think kids need to have been exposed to bands like the Beatles, to composers like Mozart, to bands like I Prevail, the metal band, to jazz artists like Jamie Cullum, Frank Sinatra, Billie Holiday, all that sort of stuff. Because like your text example with the Shakespeare, it's a cultural sort of staple, and it's sort of needed. Within music, those sort of guys and girls are a cultural staple within music, like yours is in English.
Yeah, and so that would be, I guess, more to kind of like to give them cultural capital. We used to call this kind of thing, or to give them an understanding of the world and say, actually, I want to play music like this artist or in this style. It's to give them that breadth of understanding then.
Absolutely. And you hit nail on the head with the whole, I want to play music like this artist, or I want to play my music in this style. That's what kids need, because they can make so much sense of that. So I want my song to sound like, let's use Stormzy as an example. I want my cover to sound like Stormzy, sir. All right, let's have a listen to a clean version of a Stormzy song. How can you translate that to what you're doing? And they're off.
Oh, fantastic. Right. Now, we're going to pop quickly to the news, Gary, but when we come back, what I want to ask, and this, I said, I keep saying this is the hardest question, then I probably go on to even harder questions, which I know, but I promise, when we come back, and if you're listening in, the challenges of music education is what I want to unpick with you. The bits where, these are things that are causing problems within teachers' lives or within education as a whole. And I want to unpick that part of what the problems in music education are and possibly some solutions. So are you okay to stick around with us till just after the news?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, we'll see you all just on the other side of the news on Teachers Talk Radio.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Strike action dominates the news again, with a range of outlets reporting on disputes across England, Wales and Scotland. Whilst the NASUWT union reported 9 out of 10 teachers who voted in a ballot over pay voted in favour of strike action in England and Wales, the union also reported only a 42% turnout. This is below the threshold needed for lawful strike action. The union stated that whilst a strike would now not go ahead, the union remains in formal dispute with the government. The NEU is yet to release the results of its ballot and will also need to reach the 50% member turnout needed for lawful industrial action. In Scotland, the Scottish Secondary Teachers Association has warned of further strike action following walkouts by primary and secondary staff. It says it has no option unless the Scottish Government puts forward a suitable pay offer. The AIS Union and Scottish NASUWT members also aim to continue with strike action until an agreement is reached. Scottish Education Secretary Shirley Somerville maintains that the demand for a 10% pay rise continues to be unaffordable. Meanwhile, the University and College Union has announced 15 new strike days planned across 150 UK universities in February and March. It has said that a pay offer worth between 4 and 5% made during recent talks is not enough, although the group representing university employers says that the offer is actually worth up to 7%. This comes after the government announced that tuition fees in England will be frozen for another 2 years. Although this is good news for students, the strikes mean more disruption to courses already affected by the pandemic. However, the National Union of Students has been broadly supportive of the industrial action, at least so far. Away from strike action, there have been further stories focusing on what should be taught in schools. This time, the focus is on educating pupils in the dangers of social media in spreading messages that are misogynistic and deeply toxic. The HuffPost website reports on Labour MP Alex Davey-Jones, who called in Parliament for ministers to do more to stamp out Andrew Tate-style misogyny and to stop boys being brainwashed. The MP asked what was being done to tackle radicalisation of young men, but PM Rishi Sunak responded that he was proud that this government launched the world-leading, world-first online safety bill. He also made reference to the autumn statement announcement of £2 billion of extra funding to schools. Although he did not respond with any direct reference to Tate, the online safety bill is expected to complete its final stages in the Commons shortly, before heading to the House of Lords. New figures released recently show that school absences in December were almost double the annual rate, and that this was due to illness. The absence rate, as reported in the Evening Standard, was 14.3% across state schools in the week beginning December the 12th, an increase from 7.8% across the year. The Department for Education in England said the increase was due to a rise in sick days as a result of winter illnesses such as flu, as well as COVID-19 and strep A infections such as scarlet fever. In the Channel Island of Jersey, BBC News reports that the government has brought in 11 UK supply teachers to cover for absent staff. The short-term and long-term measures have been put in place due to staffing shortages, and the supply teachers will cover for up to 2 terms. Short-term housing has been organised for those travelling to the island. The Jersey government said the current vacancy rate for Jersey was 4.3%, but that the long-term plan was to train, recruit, retain and upskill school staff. Finally, the Meanwhile in the Middle East section of the CNN website reports on the United Arab Emirates' plan to become the first Arab nation to teach about the Holocaust in its schools. The move has been praised by some and criticised by others. The nation revealed its plans in a recent tweet and intends to include Holocaust education in both primary and secondary schools. The UAE says it will work with Tel Aviv and Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Jerusalem, to help build the new curriculum. Whilst many see the move as part of the normalisation of relations with Israel, critics suggest that it does not reflect all of those living in the UAE, with many disagreeing with this policy. Full details of the story can be found on the CNN website, with comments on both sides explored in detail. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, let's start the new year with investigating the power of artificial intelligence in education. A lot of people are asking, does your school block ChatGPT? First of all, what is it? Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer, or GPT for short, is a piece of software designed to mimic talking to a person. The difference is, this person is super clever, and it's been trained by thousands of conversations in the past, and it remembers them all. There are lots of chatbots out there. GPT popular with young people as the answers it gives are not only correct, but can be slightly different each time, so it's more difficult for a teacher to spot a copy and paste homework. Let's put it to the test with a couple of school questions. I'm using a screen reader to represent ChatGPT to give it a voice. Responses are usually in text and appear as if they're being typed really quickly. I asked, what are the registers in a processor? And I got...
Registers are a type of memory that is built into the central processing unit, CPU, of a computer. They are used to store data and instructions that the CPU needs to access quickly in order to perform its functions. There are different types of registers, each with a specific purpose. For example, the instruction register stores the current instruction that the CPU is executing, while the program counter register stores the address of the next instruction to be executed.
I'll stop GPT there as 3 paragraphs were given in this answer and it's only a 1 on 2 mark question. So I asked, can you tell me in 2 sentences? And I got...
Registers are small, high-speed memory units built into the central processing unit, CPU, of a computer that are used to store data and instructions. They allow the CPU to access and manipulate data and instructions quickly, enabling it to carry out complex tasks at high speeds.
Well, thank you, GPT. That's much more to the point. Powerful, right? How about, can you summarise Of Mice and Men?
Of Mice and Men is a novella by John Steinbeck, published in 1937. It tells the story of George Milton and Lenny Small, 2 displaced migrant ranch workers during the Great Depression in California. Despite their apparent differences, the 2 men are deeply bonded and rely on each other for companionship and support. The novella ends tragically when Lenny, a simple-minded man with a love for soft things, accidentally kills a ranch owner's wife while trying to touch a soft dress, and George is forced to make the difficult decision to euthanize Lenny before he can be punished for the crime.
That's fantastic. However, there's some words in there that are quite big, and my teacher would be quite suspicious that I copied and pasted it. So I'll ask, can you summarise Of Mice and Men simply?
Of Mice and Men is a story about 2 ranch workers, George and Lenny, who are travelling together and looking for work during the Great Depression. Lenny is a large, simple-minded man with a love for soft things, and George is his caretaker and protector. Despite their differences, the 2 men are deeply bonded and rely on each other for companionship and support. However, their relationship is ultimately tested when Lenny accidentally kills a ranch owner's wife, and George is forced to make a difficult decision to protect Lenny from the consequences of his actions.
That's more like it. Now my homework's done, I think I just bought myself some more time on my games console. As always, I'd love to hear what you want to know about tech. Let us know at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio. Live from Swansea, this is the Twilight Show with Nathan Gynn on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Borrowed pal, croeso i Abertawe. Hello everyone, welcome to Swansea. Welcome to the Twilight Show with me, Nathan Gynn, on Teachers Talk Radio, and tonight I'm joined by musician and music educator Gary Cunningham. We're talking music for life. What does good music education look like? We've talked about what instruments should children be learning, and we've talked about what songs should be on the curriculum. I did say, if you were with us before the break, that we would be talking about the challenges faced by music teachers and music education in general, and the things that might be able to solve. So if you have any questions, you can tweet them live. We are live in the Podbean app. You can text them into us there. You can tweet us at TT Radio Official. Or, of course, if you're listening back as a podcast, you can message us on our social media platforms to join the conversation as well and share your thoughts. Now, welcome back, Gary. Still with us?
Still with you.
Fantastic. I do like it. Panics me at that point, I must say, coming back after the news. And that was a particularly hard news to listen to with this, Stephen, the 2 Minute Tech there with ChatGPT reading out the answers. I am thankful. It would beat me hands down on an English paper. It still won't beat me talking out in front of a class, though. So thankfully, it's not going to take my job just yet. Now, I said that we were, going to be talking about some of the challenges. Now, from my point of view, from a primary perspective, and it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on this. One of the biggest challenges that a primary education for music faces is sort of teacher confidence, but also tied into that teacher ability, because certainly throughout my training, English, maths as a primary school teacher, those things were there. Geography was there. History was there. Science, all of those things were there. Music I did a PGC and was a couple of hours. So, one of the questions for me around, what can we do to from a primary level is that that teacher ability is non-specialist teaching it. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about the challenges faced by music education at a secondary level.
So I think the biggest challenge for us at secondary level is the timetable situation and the lack of face-to-face time we have with our students. We have one lesson a week, whereas most what you call core subjects have them multiple times a week. And I know obviously the core subjects are very important and they're core for a reason. Um, but when we only see them once a week, it's sometimes really challenging to get them to where they're supposed to be, or to keep them engaged, to help them remember what they did last week. For me to remember some of their names, it's very frustrating for me when I've been teaching these kids for since September, and sometimes I have to really think. Like, you use a seating plan to remember names, and sometimes it can be really difficult to build those relationships with the kids because you only see them once a week. And they don't see it as something as important as English, maths, and science. Whereas I think education as a whole is important. Every subject on a timetable has its own importance and its own value in the world. I mean, obviously, you can't put music and drama and art and food and all that stuff 2, 3 times a week. It's just not enough hours in the day for it. But do I think that, especially at year 9, when we're priming them for GCSE, do I think that it should be upped to twice a week for some groups? Absolutely.
And I find that that you're really interesting take, that time of it, because I'm going to put this out there. One of the things that I thought must be incredibly challenging at a secondary school, I mean it is at primary school, but at a secondary school particularly, would be something like behavior management around music. Is that difficult in the classrooms? If you're getting out the instruments, as you say, there can be a lot of noise.
Oh, yes. And uh, I've learned a lot about behaviour management, particularly in music environments. Um, and it's very different because obviously before I landed this job, which I'm really loving, I was a supply teacher for secondary for quite some time to get some classroom experience. And it's a lot simpler in my head to manage the behaviour in a normal, quote unquote, classroom than it is in a music classroom. Because when you give a child an instrument, they will either play it properly or they will use it in another inappropriate way. And you have to really manage that. And it's the noise, it's getting them to stop when you need them to stop. It's projecting your voice over the noise that they're making. It can be very tiring on the voice. Thankfully, I'll come up with some techniques to stop me from having to shout 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 over keyboards and glockenspiels and drums and everything else. But yeah, behaviour management in the music classroom can be challenging. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask about, and this kind of ties into the primary as well, but also ties into your comment there about sort of, supply and those kind of things around music education. And now, obviously, in our ideal world, a talented, trained music teacher who is a talented musician themselves is our ideal. But are there elements, is there space in music education? And I hope so at primary particularly, but there must sometimes be occasions where your class needs to be covered by maybe a non-specialist, maybe a supply teacher. Is that possible within a subject like music?
Yeah, it's possible because what happens then is that we give them something music related, but we're not doing practical tasks. So I had to be covered a little while back. I was off for a little while because I was unwell over winter, and I had them create it, like design their own concert or design their own CD and things like that. It was all relating to music, but there was no getting out instruments and things like that because if they needed their ukulele or guitar tuned and things like that, or their bass guitar tuned, a supply teacher non-specialist, through no fault of their own, is not going to know how to do that.
And another thing that interests me about music, and maybe there is a different perspective here at primary and at secondary about how far ahead of the students you need to be in your musical ability, and to at that level. So this might be I'm trying to word it in the correct way, but how good a musician does a music teacher need to be?
At Key Stage 3, you need basic piano skills at best, and in an ideal world, to be able to play the basics of a second instrument. That's like being ideal, but definitely some well thought out and well practiced piano skills for sure. Second instrument is a desired thing. It's not a prerequisite, in my opinion.
And and as far as that sort of goes, then if we're tracking back down, is there, or do you see as young people come up to you, that there is a need for more music specialism? And I ask this question because at different times in the primary stage, we've had things where music has been taken over by a music specialist, and that maybe from the local authority or someone hired in, and then that will disappear again, or maybe the class teacher would be expected to teach that. What's your opinion on sort of at the primary level then, how it's being delivered, potentially by people like myself with no real musical talent whatsoever?
I mean, I've got a lot of friends who are primary school teachers, and a few of them teach me have got to teach music, and they've come running to me and they've gone, Gary, I've got to teach music this term. What do I do? I'm panicking. I've never done it before. And I just go, Kiranga, musical context, they're your best friends. Because obviously, as a music specialist, I can pull a lesson out of my head pretty much. And it will cover everything that needs to be covered. I can change my lesson on the fly should I need to. If the practice rooms are being used by a GCSE student, for example, and I was going to do ensemble work, can't do that anymore. Right, let's go to the keyboard room instead and do that instead. Whereas a non-specialist would be like, the practice rooms aren't available. What now? So I think it's not being a specialist at a primary level. Yeah, it would be lovely. In our little rosy world we were discussing before the break about if you had the budget and money was endless and the world was spun in the right direction all the time, what could you have? Yeah, I would love for every primary school to have a specialist music lead. Absolutely, but that is not the case. But there are lots and lots of resources available now to help those primary school teachers that are having to teach a subject that is very specialist and that they're not a specialist in. So it's not impossible.
Not impossible. No, I quite like that. And when I think that the primary school is very different. There are there are different expectations. I think my worry always with those things is when we get to the point that maybe we are harming the opportunities when we pass them on to our secondary colleagues, that we haven't maybe given them that opportunity. But I think hopefully if as long as they still have the enjoyment of music, they still have a love for music, and they still have the opportunity, then I think that's a really solid start for us when we pass them on to secondary. I wanted to ask you, we've talked a lot about Key Stage 1 and 2, Key Stage 3 particularly as well, and the things that young people are doing, the music, the opportunities, and all of those parts. Now, what I wanted to get from you, and we just had a message in, so I'll read that first before I ask you sort of my next question. But we've had there from one of our listeners just saying they're primary music specialists here, and while it's great, the teachers sometimes think they don't have to engage. If I'm not there, music doesn't happen, and it shouldn't be like that. Now, that's a comment from one of our listeners, and it does actually tie into sort of where my next question was going, which is the musical life of a school. And this is kind of where I wanted to kind of, start when we wrap up the show, and we are coming towards the end now, but that musical life of a show, because I wonder, and maybe your perspective on this might be different, but for me, we often talk about reading through the curriculum. Like, and you'll hear in secondary schools as well, where we're talking about, staff meetings where we're all teachers of reading, we're all teachers of writing. Music in itself, then, with assemblies, with concerts, all of those things, to me seems like it's almost bigger than the subject. Is that your experience of music as a sort of musician and a music educator?
Is what my experience? Sorry, repeat that question. Sorry.
Does music stop at your classroom door?
No.
And
Never.
then yeah, and so those opportunities throughout. How do we see it then? How do we grow it? For instance, do you communicate with other subject teachers? Are there links there, or is it through the assemblies and the music that they walk into? How do you reach outside of your music lessons?
It's for us. It's about liaising with other performing arts subjects first and foremost, because obviously that's our bracket. So at the moment, I know that one of my colleagues in drama is doing musical theatre. So of course, it makes sense for that to be carried through in music. Within English, poetry, kids say, "Oh, I can't write a poem." Well, you can write a song in music. Mr. Cunningham's told me. So what's different? It's just a song without music behind it, and they link it. So I think those cross-curricular links are really important. It doesn't stop at the classroom door. There are opportunities. We do a lot of culture-based stuff at school, and obviously music comes under that as well. Music from different cultures. We have like cultural assemblies, culture days, all sorts. And there's all sorts they don't necessarily walk into music during assemblies, but there's always for a while when I first joined school, our school bell was classical music.
What song?
That was really nice.
Or mixed songs.
There was lots.
Oh, okay. So like a different tune. I was thinking there, and I have to say, at primary school, that is music walking in, and I imagine at secondary school less so, singing in assembly, but music singing in assemblies is a massive part of education lower down the school, and you talk about school choirs as well.
Yeah, there's there's school choirs attached to my school in primary. The singing assemblies. A colleague of mine used to be a year four teacher, and he was the music lead because he's a drama specialist. He thought, right, you're performing arts, so you can be music lead. And he usually singing assemblies. He took a group of kids to the Big Sing at the O2, which is a massive sort of school singing festival that a company puts on, but the name escapes me now. So I feel like because at secondary level there's more extracurricular opportunities and there's more peripatetic instrumental lesson opportunities, there's less of the whole singing assemblies and different things like that. I feel like it's in the department, but as a department, we make sure that we push the music agenda quite a lot. And to be honest, our music department is like a revolving door of a break time and a lunchtime. And as annoying as it can get, the kids knocking on the door to come in when we want to eat our lunch, it's also brilliant. So I'm like, you know what? I would rather this than be sat here and no kids in what they've got available to them, no kids accessing the provision, no kids unlocking their talent.
And that is I have seen that so many times, and even myself, I have to say, by the time I was at sixth form, I was spending every break and lunchtime in one of the practice studios with a group of friends playing music as a band, and that was a lovely part of that experience. I'm gonna ask, as we wrap up, because we will have people listening here from primary, from across subjects as well, who can potentially help out your subject, your area of the profession. What would you like, either music teachers or all teachers to take away and maybe think about when they come to school tomorrow, that would benefit the opportunities, or just music education in general for the young people they work with? What can we all do?
Just remember the phrase that, music makes the world go round. And it is a universal language, and it is paramount. Um, and it's a really good tool to engage those kids that are a little bit difficult at times, because if you're learning a poem, for example, and they're not quite understanding, get them to clap out the rhythm. They'll soon click on. There's a reason why we have nursery rhymes, for like happy birthday and things like that. Why everything revolves around song, because songs are memorable, music is memorable. That's what I'd like them to remember.
Fantastic. Now, Gary, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. I know, a busy day for you, busy day for all teachers, start of the year. So it's been absolutely wonderful to kind of pick your brains and find out a little bit more about it. So thank you so much for coming on.
I've really enjoyed it, Nathan. Thank you for having me.
No, it's been wonderful, and it's also nice to speak to someone with a similar accent as well.
Yes.
So it reminds me very much of being back home. So yeah, great to hear from you. I will say, if you're listening to us, don't forget you can continue this conversation. Tweet us at TT Radio Official, even after the show, even if you're listening back to this as a podcast. I will say, there are more shows on later tonight. If you're listening live, 9:00, we've got another show coming for you on Teacher Talk Radio, and of course throughout the rest of the week as well. Our shows are popping up every day, and well worth a listen, all kinds of different topics. And the most important part is that if you have found this as a podcast through iTunes, through Spotify, through any of those things, you can go to ttradio.org/listenback, where there is a search feature, and you can type into that search bar anything you like. You could type in music and it would come up with all of the shows that we've had on, over 1,000 shows, where music has been a keyword within the description. You could type in behavior, you could type in anything you want at ttradio.org/listenback. That search feature is really a useful tool if you're looking for something specific. If you're just looking to join us and tune in and talk it out, 9:00, there'll be another show live for you. And good night. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Nathan.
And from here in South Wales, we say Nostar, which is good night, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.